Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm finally making a video about the Jobava London system, which is the opening I play as white. I play it in all my games now. It's definitely a very fun opening, and I honestly recommend it to everyone, even though it does break an opening principle. And the opening principle it breaks is after d4, d5, you block in your c pawn, which you're not supposed to do, with playing knight to c3, but it is a very interesting opening, and I think you do get compensation for breaking this principle. And computer agrees as well, you're not any worse. At worst, you're equal, but computer still evaluates white as better in this opening. So the main line, which I'm going to go through first, is knight to f6 and bishop to f4. Now the main idea of this opening is essentially playing knight b5 and targeting the c7 pawn. And it may seem a bit backwards, but I'm going to show you what to do if they play badly at the end. But right now I'm going to show you the main line, the way that black should play, and you should know what to do against that. Yeah, e6 is the most common move that I face. There's a couple others that I'm going to go through, but that's later on. So just keep paying attention for now, and we'll get to that. So you play knight b5. The main idea of the opening, essentially, in this line, and the best idea here is knight to a6. This is the most common, especially in upper level. But there is also like bishop b4 check, and let's say you play c3 and they can stop it this way, but this is okay for white as well. And they also have bishop e6, which I cover in a later line, so I will hold off on that. The most common move that I face is knight to a6, besides the bishop d6, which I think is important to know. And what you're supposed to do here is play e3, open up the bishop, kind of protect the knight, and start being able to develop. And after c6, kicking your knight back, you simply go knight back to c3. And if they don't move their knight back, then, like for example, bishop to e7, you take the knight with the bishop, doubling the a pawns, which is very, very bad for black and gives you a very nice position. And basically after you do that, you kind of just develop. You can put your knight on a4 and try and go to c5. You can put your knight on e5 and target the c6 pawn. And honestly, your play is very easy here. For example, after castles, one of the most common ideas I face is a5. And you're like, the heck does that even do? Well, I don't think it's a good idea personally, but I see it played almost every time I go into this line. Everyone always plays a5, and the reason they do that is because they don't see anywhere for their bishop to go, so they want to make space for their bishop. And one positive of doing this for black is you can play bishop a6 with tempo, but honestly you can just play rook e1 now, and it's the third move on the engine, and you still have a decent advantage. Now computer wants c5, but I think you can handle it on your own. I mean, they have double a pawns, you can target weaknesses. It's a very nice opening to have. But on to my next point is trading the bishop, and also this covers a bit of a c6 line, which I've studied a little bit more, so I have a bit more knowledge of this opening after c6. Essentially what you want to do is play e3. Obviously you can't play knight b5, so that idea is kind of shut down. That's basically the point of c6. But another idea here is queen to b6. But after queen b6, you play rook b1, and you're absolutely fine. It looks a bit ugly, but trust me, rook b1 is the most practical. And it's also recommended by Naroditsky and GM Bortnick. So I trust in their judgment, and that's why their judgment has leached into mine. So yeah, after e3, I don't think I've actually ever seen queen b6 in this position. The most common here by far is bishop to f5. And the computer agrees with this move, it's the best move. But essentially what I recommend here, and also what Naroditsky and Bortnick recommend, funnily enough, is bishop to d3. And you're like, okay, just trade bishop, that's normal, right? Okay, the most common move here is bishop takes d3. And you may be like, okay, take back the queen. Why would I double my pawns? Well, that's where it gets interesting. See, your c pawn is already blocked by your knight. So what's wrong with taking with the c pawn? And now you have ideas such as pushing e4, and now it has a d pawn on d3 supporting its push to e4. Meanwhile, this other d pawn would not be supporting the push to e4. So taking with the c pawn is much more practical. It's the top move on the engine. Usually when you trade bishops like that, you want to take with the pawn. There is a case that you actually take with the queen, but I don't think I actually have that in the video. So just generally take back with the c pawn, especially if it helps you push for e4. That's kind of the main idea I had with this. If they go back, you actually just want to get really aggressive and play h4. And if they play like h6 now you take, and they have to take back with the f pawn, and you can already play like queen d3, and you are much better here because they're forced to play king to f7, and you just kind of develop like normally, and you're already winning. Like computer validates this as +3. So yeah, if they play bishop back thinking they can mimic a London system, show them that they can't do that and that they're actually terrible and you're going to beat them. And I haven't seen this too often, but e6 is actually the top move. But after they play e6, just take. And of course they have a stonewall kind of, but you kind of just play normally. Knight f3, and they also develop normally, and you castle. And knight h5 is the top move, which is fine. For example, knight h5, you can just play either bishop g5 to try and like stop from trading the bishop, but also you can just put your knight in the center, and you can kind of just play this like a stonewall, especially if they take. Now you're in a stonewall setup yourself. Of course they can play f6 here, but then you have queen h5, and this is a very common tactic, so just be looking out for tactics like that in these kinds of positions. And on my next point, I'm going to be showing you what I recommend against the g6 systems. Another way this can pop up is after knight h6 and then g6. This transposes, so don't worry too much about the move order. If they play g6, essentially I just do one thing against all g6 setups, and it's lended me a lot of wins. So I definitely can highly recommend this setup against the fianchetto. So after e3, most common move I face is d6. Sometimes I face castles immediately and then d6, but they transpose, so don't worry about it. But essentially after they do this, you play h4, and if they make the mistake of castling, you have h5. I'll be like, the heck, dude? That's a pawn. What are you doing to my pawn? I'm trying to learn, and you're telling me to just lose a pawn. Well, you see, this is where the brilliancy of the Jobava London comes in. And I'm saying brilliancy for a reason, is because after knight takes h5, the computer always marks this move as a brilliancy. Always. Every time you take rook takes h5, you will get a brilliancy. I'm telling you. I've seen it happen every single time it's a brilliancy. So if you want brilliancies, play rook takes h5. I recommend a good line. This is backed up by computer. You are much better in this position. Top move here is knight d7, and after bishop g3, you're just straight up throwing the mate. And if you get hit with knight f6, you play queen back to h2, and essentially develop like normally. It may sound weird, but you just need to bring more pieces into the attack. For example, after knight to c6, you play knight out to f3. I don't really know what to do here. h6 is the top move, even though it just straight up loses a pawn. I don't understand that at all, so I'm not going to show you that line. Let's say queen a5, maybe to discourage long castles. But that actually does discourage long castles. It prevents it. So yeah, don't long castle after they play queen a5. Top move here is bishop g5, trying to get rid of the knight and threaten checkmate. Top move here, rook d8, and you can take. And after bishop takes, you have queen takes h7, and now you can long castle and bring the attack in. You have a lot of attacking ideas here, so I trust that you can come up with your own attacking ideas once you reach this position back here. This position is very nice for white. Personally, I prefer playing knight out to f3 after, I don't know, a common move I see is actually f5, and that discourages bishop to bishop d3. So if they play f5 ever, just play knight out to f3 and bring your knight this way. The main idea of f5, by the way, isn't actually to block the bishop, is to trade queens. So after they trade queens, you can actually just trade queens. I'm serious, like you can trade queens because then you have knight d5 and you're threatening a fork, and top move here is just e5, which is absolutely crazy to me. Is if they try to play knight a6, then you have bishop to a6 and then you fork. So you definitely have ideas here. You don't have to play for checkmate, you can just win material. It's a very nice setup against the fianchetto systems, so I highly recommend h5. Next point is a very common mistake I see in Jobava. This goes back to the main line, and after knight to b5, I actually really see this a lot, which is weird. People play bishop d6 a lot, which is just a really bad move. It just kind of ruins their position positionally, which sounds a bit redundant, but it's true. And essentially, after they play that, you take with a knight, they double their pawns, and it sounds a little bit weird, but you go back to the traditional like London system setup. You set up this triangle, and your position is better. If they try and play knight c6, you actually want to trade off the late squared bishop for the knight. For example, you can go takes, and you have bishop takes d5. Oh wait, no you don't. Don't listen to that. Yeah, you get the idea. You can win this position pretty easily. But yeah, after e5, you should probably actually play bishop g3, because if they take, they have tripled pawns, and you just take with e takes d4, very common London idea, take back with the e pawn. You're not really worried about any checks here because you have knight to e2 and castles very soon. Yeah, your position is just very nice here. You don't really have to worry about much. Just keep putting pressure on the position, and it'll be very practical to play. You have the bishop pair, they have double pawns. You can just play this and play normally. It's chess. And then my last idea is actually what to do if they play a losing line. I actually see this quite a lot, especially in my brother's games. He's around 1000 rated, so I think this will actually happen to you guys a lot. If they play two knights against the Jobava London system, it's actually losing for them because of knight b5, and they can't play knight a6. Their e-pawn isn't pushed, so they can't give this check to protect that square, and they also can't play bishop to d6 to defend that square like that. So, in this position, I actually almost always see the top move. Sometimes I see just straight up just blunder the fork, so beware of that. If they blunder the fork, please just take the rook. But if they play the top move, which is e5, obviously now that cuts the circulation of the bishop to the c-pawn, so do not take the c-pawn in this position. I actually recommend taking with the bishop. It sounds a little bit weird, but I do recommend taking with the bishop, and the reason is after knight takes e5, d takes e5. If the knight essentially goes anywhere, especially if it goes forward, which I think will be very common in your games, you have the tactic queen takes d5. Now after this, you may be like, buddy, you just blundered my queen. What are you doing? I'm disliking the video. Thing is, after queen takes d5, you have knight takes e7, forking, except now you're also forking the king and the queen. So after king d8 or king d7, you have knight takes e5, and guess what? You're up 3 pawns. I can't really do much better for you in this position. I mean, it's a completely winning position. I think you can win this. Just don't make the mistake of long castling next move. For example, long castles. You actually are losing now. Just don't make that mistake, please. Just develop normally, like knight f3. If you really want to castle alongside, you can play f3, which is actually supported by the computer, just to kick the knight out. For example, if the knight goes back, you can just take it. But, oh, not there. Knight here. now you can long castle and be very comfortable, and now you can develop normally with e4. Bring your bishop out somewhere safe like c4, and then bring your knight out behind the bishop so you don't block it in. But yeah, I think that's about as much as I can explain in this opening, in this video. If you want more, just leave a comment down below, and also leave a like. That will help me out very much. And yeah, I hope you get a bunch of wins in the Jobava London system. I like this opening a lot. I think it's a very strong opening, especially for beginners. But yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I'll see you in tomorrow's video.